Your Royal Highness, our special guest of honor, Kábíyèsí Olúbàdàn of Ìbàdàn, Ọba Rashidi Ládọjà, Kábíyèsí o, the Emir of Jiwa, Balogun's chairman of the APC here, distinguished members of the National Assembly, I particularly recognize you, former governors, former chairman of national parties, members of the National Assembly, in particular, let me recognize Honorable Ukeje Nena, let me recognize former minister, in particular, Sunday Diary, one of our panelists, all the leaders across who are here, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the management and board of the Media Trust, let me also recognize you. It gives me great pleasure to be here this morning as the chairman of the 23rd Annual Dialogue of the Daily Trust. Distinguished guests, esteemed scholars, policymakers, colleagues in public service, past and present, I thank you for this privilege of chairing this occasion and giving an opportunity of addressing a subject that speaks to the very soul of our nation, of the journey of the Fourth Republic. Gatherings such as this, convened by credible media institutions, are indispensable to the health of any democracy. They compel reflection, encourage accountability, and demand honesty. In societies that make progress, the media does not simply report history, it interrogates it. Today I speak not as a partisan actor, but as a citizen who has had the privilege of serving this country at the highest levels at the executive and legislative arms of government, at state and national level respectively. And as one who remains deeply invested in the future of our democracy, I have seen our democracy tested, strained, and sometimes bent, but not broken. Our focus is on the trajectory of Nigeria's Fourth Republic. We must ask, with candor and courage, what is working? What is failing, and what must change? This question isn't just timely, it is profound. Initially, I must admit and be honest, I was reluctant to accept to chair this occasion, not because the subject matter was not appropriate or germane, but more because of how close we are to an election year, and whether truly we are prepared at this point to make it a productive discussion as against a platform to push our respective political agendas. For us to make a meaningful session this morning in chairing this occasion, in recognition of the appreciation of the organizers who are commendable, we must commend for this effort. Our respectable leaders, starting with one of us, our Kábíyèsí, who's been a governor, a senator, and who's been through all the tests most any politician will go through in this country. I will propose an appeal that we do not see this event as a campaign platform, be it for the speakers nor the participants. It is not a time to just speak from our political device. Let us all drop our political gowns this morning. Because present here are leaders from all parts of the country, north and south, east and west, who have played one way or the other significant roles in this country, and who are still playing active roles. Let us discuss as patriotic Nigerians, all with a common goal to make our beloved country great. Our discussion should be about the message, not the messenger today. Let us focus on the message and not who is speaking. As difficult and daunting how that is in the current political climate, today, let us all step up to make this discussion productive, with the hope that results we can take away with us to begin to implement and ensure that the Fourth Republic is truly successful. There are things that are working or things that are worked, and accepting that these does not mean that you are in support of the present government. And at the same time, there are things that are not working, and we should be able to have the courage and conviction as well to say so. And in making such criticism as well, does not mean you have become an enemy of the present government or institutions, because this journey did not start today or now. I am encouraged with the quality of leaders present and the speakers invited to address the topic. The speakers are here are individuals who you may not like their politics or you may not like their style, but you cannot deny their capacity and their ability to contribute to nation building. Countries that have excelled have done that through deliberate and intentional acts like this, with a focus and a plan on how to improve or correct those things required and necessary to make democracy work for its people. I will leave the details of the discussion to the speakers and the panelists. But I must say, having endured a civil rule of 26 years with a peaceful power change across political parties is an achievement of note. An environment where there's freedom of speech, media pluralism, openly criticism of government is possible, vibrant civil society, social media, and courts that at times have restrained excesses of the executive. Surely we must accept that we have done well to a certain extent in this country. And when you now add on top of that an economy that has expanded from the 59 billion economy in 1999 to over 243 billion now, and one of the largest in Africa, I think we should also be fair to ourselves that we are not doing too badly. But despite this, some will argue that democratic continuity without quality is that success. I am sure our panelists and those who are here will contribute on that discussion. So as we discuss what is not working, which I'm sure our speakers will go into detail, I would like us to consider what would make us move from success, in what I call success in survival, as sustaining democracy, as against to addressing our failure not to have used democracy to bring about transformation that will make Nigerian people better and will work better for the ordinary citizens. It is in that light that personally I want to just highlight on 4 issues that I would like our speakers, as they discuss, and our panelists, issues that I think sit on top of the general issues of infrastructure, health, education. And those 4 issues to me, which I think are germane, that we must begin to look in our society, is 1, judicial independence and quick dispensation of justice. We are a society that there are not consequences for bad behavior and non-adherence to the rule of law. We're a society that we need to address the issue of morality and values of a society. And of course, the issue of the fight against corruption and the establishment of credible elections. I hope our speakers and contributors will let us have their thoughts on this, because I believe that the journey has to address some of these larger issues that will make the society a better society. So that finally history will not judge us, not just by how long did the Fourth Republic survive, no, but how well it served the Nigerian people and shaped democracy. The judgment is still being written, and I hope when the history is written, A bright morning in January 2026 in Abuja will feature as one of those days we put together a plan for the future. At this note, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again. I welcome you all for a useful and fruitful discussion. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, sir, for that. That was quite enlightening. Now, moving on, it is my pleasure to invite our special guest of honor, a respected traditional ruler and former governor. Ladies and gentlemen, His Imperial Majesty Oba Rashidi Adeolu Ladoja, the Olubadan of Ibadan land. You're highly welcome, Your Imperial Majesty.
Mr. Chairman, let me stand on the existing protocol as well established by the chairman. Well done. It is my pleasure to be here today. In fact, I think it was an honor done to me to have been invited to this occasion. And let me say that I'm delighted that the Daily Trust Media Limited has consistently sustained this dialogue over the past 23 years. We don't have the history of enduring dialogues like this. Something must have happened somewhere and it is truncated. This dialogue makes it a catalyst for promoting national and continental integration. Over the years, the same dialogue has stimulated critical discussions over the years. The series of dialogue has stimulated critical discussions among Nigerians and others on sustainable socio-political and economic developments, both to our dear country, Nigeria, and the African continent at large. These discussions have attracted a diverse range of personalities, including actors in and out of government, former presidents and SFCs, members of the diplomatic corps, and captains of industry, among others. Once again, I commend the organizers for the commitment. This year's theme, Nigeria's Fourth Republic, what is working and what is not, is particularly timely because we are now seeing that after 26 years of continuous democracy, not all things are what we plan them to be. Most of us here had dreams, particularly those people that are going to anchor the discussion today. The question we ask them is, are your dreams being realized? Is this where you want us to be? Well, that is the reason why you are here. Luckily, all of you are experienced. And then my brother, or my brothers, Madam Elrufai and Sunday Dare, you have been participants in shaping the course of this country. And I'm sure that you had dreams. The question now is, are these dreams being realized? Is this where we want to be? The chairman has already told us that all of you should cast away your toga of politics. Luckily, I'm not a politician. I left being a politician on the 26th of September, 2025. And I have a good witness. Mr. President was there. So let me just remind the people that are going to do justice of some of the ideas of what is working and what is not working. We have had 26 years now of uninterrupted democracy. Those of us who are born before the independence and who are not youths, we are not young people at that time. Those of us then knew what we were expecting from independence. We saw how Nigeria was going. And still, this is still Nigeria that we said we are doing experiments. Of course, most of these experiments have been frustrated one way or the other. But now we have had 26 years of interrupted democratic dispensation. And I hope that we will continue forever. One of the most significant achievements of the Fourth Republic of over 26 years of continuous civilian government, a milestone none of the previous republics attained. This has fostered greater democratic political stability compared to the era of military coups, of course, not without some hiccups. I can remember the doctrine of necessity. We have hiccups, and we have been able, from time to time, find solutions, even outside our constitution. And that is what led to the doctrine of necessity some time ago. We have had possibility of a peaceful transition from one government to another. A situation whereby election is lost by a president and he voluntarily accepted defeat and was even present at handing over is commendable. It's an achievement. We have seen other nations where losing election leads to other things. The latest one was in the, I think, was it not Cape Verde? So, the most thank God that we have been able to go from one government to another peacefully, from one party to another peacefully. We have learned from that exercise that Nigeria is bigger than all of us. We've had expanded political freedom. What do I mean by that? We can move from one party to another without problem. Of course, it's still not perfect. What I mean by not perfect is that maybe I would have wanted to contest as a non-partisan politician. But the Constitution did not permit me. So that's why I had to look for solace instead of contesting as an independent candidate. That's one of the things that that you should please try to tell us how you can go about it. Because I was forced to go to accord when I was not welcome again in the PDP. So, and that was part of the hiccups that we have. But I think now we have already overcome that one. We now have increase in political participation. Women and youths are now there. The last election showed clearly the force of the youths. After the NSAS issue, then came the election, and they now mobilized again and said, this is what we want. So we are making progress in that time. So, and women, I don't think that they need any reason to ask for special consideration because they are strong enough to compete. They are strong enough to compete. Isn't it nice here? If she wanted to continue in the house, she would have continued forever. But she decided to retire for now. I don't know whether the next stage will be to go to the upper chamber, where I'm sure that she will be welcome. That decided not to join politics. He remains a good politician. Edify, my dear friend, is a colossus when it comes to politics. So, and in spite of all those, the youths still made sure that their voices were heard very loud in the last election. We have been able to strengthen the democratic institutions. But I don't know whether we have done enough, whether we can, in all conscience, say that Nigeria electoral system meets our expectation. That's for you people to tell us, because it's really whereby 80 to 90% of electoral results are questioned in courts, and courts have become the place where winners are made. Doesn't seem to be the norm in other countries, in other democracies. Please, let us find a way to make sure that our votes count, and the choice of the people, irrespective of who they are, must be the one that takes you to power, not the courts of law, because we have made our courts to be under severe strain. And in some cases, they are even losing their credibility because people don't agree with their judgments. So please, that's part of what we should please enlighten us on. The chairman talked to us about how far we have gone economically. We are the largest economy in Africa now. That translated into good life for all Nigerians. Can all Nigerians get good medical care? Can all Nigerians eat enough to their hunger? Do we have water in our homes? Are roads safe? These are part of the things that go with the economy of the countries. So, if we are not where we are, what should we do? What should we do? And that is what, those are part of those things we believe are working. Now, those things that are not working, insecurity. Our foreign minister in Davos was pleading with the investors that what we have in Nigeria is not generalized insecurity, but scattered insecurities. Well, I agree with him. As long as we have not yet had an insurrection, it's still scattered. But it is lasting too long. It's lasting too long. Nobody feels safe because you don't know where the next attack, you don't know from where the next attack will come. Who will be attacked next? I don't agree that it is a religious issue. It's not. But some perpetrators are making it look so for their own benefit. So please, insecurity is part of what we, whether you call it anything you like, call it banditry, call it kidnapping, anything that is associated with insecurity is something that you cannot afford in Nigeria that is growing. Corruption and weak institutions. We like to fight corruption. But at times, those of us who are charged with fighting this corruption want to take our own part of it. And also, the impression that is being created at times is that in fighting corruption, we make exceptions. Are we really making exceptions? If you change from this party to that party, does that make you become a saint from a devil? So, our institutions, ICPC, police, EFCC, DSS, are they strong enough to hold up to their oath of office? Because I believe that even though you are employed by the president, you are nominated, you are employed by the president, but as long as you take the oath of office, you are now left with your conscience and your God. You should therefore discharge your responsibilities to the best of your ability. challenges, you have to also talk to us about socioeconomic challenges. Anybody that is sick, can he get good treatment in the hospitals? Can he afford it if the hospitals are there? Because a situation whereby we elites run abroad. We have been told that El-Rufai missed his flight in Egypt because he had a problem. Should that happen? Will that happen to an Egyptian? Will it happen to an American? So please, try to see how you can correct that one. The school. Those of us who are not too young knew that in those days, 80% of us were from the poor family. But we had education. We had committed teachers. We had government that make education priority. Now we have a lot of out-of-school children. Should that happen in Nigeria of today? Can't we guarantee education to all our children? So should we allow it to happen? So please, look at that one also. I've talked about the election, and I've talked about it under the weak institutions. Of course, we know that we have to continue to amend our laws until it starts serving our needs. So the National Assembly, the state assemblies, even the local government can make laws because they have bylaws they can make, which will make it possible for us to live with. Rule of law. Rule of law. Political party weaknesses. These are issues that affect all of us. When you cannot guarantee that. In fact, I talked to some lawyers and they said we cannot guarantee that this is what the law says. Because the interpretation today may be different from the interpretation tomorrow. And that affects the rule of law. We have had people that were accidentally killed by law enforcement agents. Law enforcement agents are complaining that the bandits and so are better equipped than them. So we must look at those issues that we make Nigeria of our dream. So let me conclude that while the framework for a beneficial democratic system exists in the Fourth Republic, as we have seen, we have had 26 years of unbroken democracy or democratic rule, which is the same thing as civil rule. The full potential of the Fourth Republic remains largely unrealized for many citizens due to persistent governance, economic, and security issues. So I want to hand over to the three speakers, the anchor of this program, to please try to find answers to some of these questions. I thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give the Oba an even bigger round of applause? Spoken with a lot of conviction, coming from his wisdom in service, while providing us with a lot of historical context laced with experience and knowledge. To be honest, not many would willingly retire from Nigerian politics, especially when they still have some currency to spend. It's good to know that there are still a lot of people in the political space with a lot of conviction to actually say no, even when they are being highly sought after. The Oba has made quite a good number of points, tasking the panel to help answer some of the questions that he has raised around quality of life, systemic gaps, and a variety of other issues. And I do hope that we have enough time to digest some of these points that have been raised. I'd like to take a quick time to acknowledge the attendance of Alhaji Aliyu Akoshile, shareholder and former Associate Director, Business and Strategy at Media Trust Group. Thank you so much for coming, sir. Mr. Osita Ukechukwu, a public relations consultant, a friend of the house, is here with us this afternoon. I'd like to also acknowledge Professor Tunde Adeniran, former Minister of Education and Nigeria's ambassador to the Federal Republic of Germany. Also like to acknowledge a good friend of the house, someone who's well-versed in Nigerian politics, policy and governance, Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed. Thank you also for joining us this afternoon. His Excellency, Mr. Hussein Mezud, Algerian ambassador to Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know where Mr. Ambassador Mezud is. Can you please stand to be acknowledged? Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. All right. Before we proceed with the recognitions, we have to make haste because if you do check our program of event, we are running behind schedule. So I would like to call on our first guest speaker to deliver his presentation. I will call on all our, especially the two that are here live with us today, to try as much as they can to keep to time so that we can cover and touch base with all the issues that need to be discussed. So, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, His Imperial Majesty, Your Royal Highness, please turn your attention to the screen as we introduce you to our first guest speaker.
Sunday Akindare is a journalist turned public servant, known for bridging media, policy, and youth development. Trained in international studies and diplomacy with fellowships at NYU, Harvard, and Oxford, Dare built his early career in hard journalism. Sunday Akindare is a journalist turned public servant, known for bridging media, policy, and youth development. Trained in international studies and diplomacy with fellowships at NYU, Harvard, and Oxford, Dare built his early career in hard journalism. From the news and tempo magazines to leading the Hausa service at the Voice of America in Washington, D.C., he later moved into public policy, serving in strategic media and communication roles at the federal level, including work that shaped Nigeria's broadcast and telecom space. As the Executive Commissioner at the Nigeria Communications Commission, he managed stakeholder relations at a time of major sector reforms. From 2019 to 2023, he served as Nigeria's Minister of Youth and Sports, where his focus stayed firmly on youth capacity. Under his watch, hundreds of thousands of young Nigerians received digital skills training, youth funding expanded, NYC allowances increased, and national youth programs scaled up. Known for his calm delivery and policy depth, Sunday Dare brings a media mind to governance and a development lens to leadership. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Sunday Akin Dare.
Good morning, everyone. I get this all the time. Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. It's a bright morning, January morning, and it's a great honor to be here, and of course to listen to the speakers that have come forth to speak. I'll be very short on my protocols, but let me just quickly recognize the former President of the Nigerian Senate, my Egbon, Dr. Saraki. It's a pleasure to see you always. Let me recognize the chairman of our party, my party, the APC, the ruling party, Professor. Good morning. Let me also recognize my Oban Kabesi, Kabesio, Kadipelori, Kibata Pelese, Irukere Oba, okay, Niyamalo. Let me also just recognize other dignitaries, the Emir, Assalamu alaikum. I must also recognize my distinguished senators from Oyo State, Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari and Senator Sarafuddin from Oyo State. I plead that I recognize everyone else present here, especially my co-speakers, Honorable Inena and Malam El-Rufai, wherever you're watching from. I think the topic for today has received a level of interrogation already. And I want to thank the Daily Trust Board and Management for picking such a very important topic at such a critical time of our development as a country, especially our democratic journey. I'm also happy that beyond just presenting our paper this morning, we'll have an interactive session on the panel discussion and, of course, the questions and answers that will come forth. In Nigeria and elsewhere, democratic governance is best understood not as a straight line or some mathematical progression, but as a learning curve, a non-linear process shaped by all things that lend to govern human affairs and human nature itself. It is a complex, multifaceted process marked by innovation, ideas, and inclusion, but also confronted by interruption, imperfection, information, and implementation. And the reality, of course, of too many competing and just demands contending for little resources. Governance is not only setting an agenda, but it entails a dynamic reassessment and reprioritizing of that agenda as events unfold. And often, the telling events are not of your own making and choosing, but respond to them and respect their impact. You must. Any democratic government must thus reflect not only the political climate of its time, but also the economic conditions that define the scope of the resources it may have at its disposal upon which it has to govern. Therefore, the enshrinement of democracy in Nigeria was slowed, not so much because Nigerians rejected it, It was slowed because leadership and institutions responsible for our democratic expansion did not fully understand the urgency and the importance of managing diversity, delivering justice, creating tolerance, and strengthening political legitimacy through economic fairness. Yet, through the trials and troubles of our democracy remained the lodestar for our country. The quest for and the hope for democracy guided us through situations that have beguiled and halted other nations. The Fourth Republic is therefore significant, not because it is flawless, but because it represents Nigeria's best and most sustained attempt at permanently establishing democratic ideals, ethos, and institutions meant to carry the nation forward. And I think all those that spoke before me have alluded to that fact. The First Republic, identity before nationhood. The First Republic was intensely regional, tribal, and ethnically charged. Politics was more dependent on identity than ideology. Electoral competition became so hyper-competitive that it distorted into an existential and conflictual exercise. Instead of molding us together, the politics of the day was governed more by centrifugal forces. In sad irony, nationalists who fought together against colonial rule to gain our independence became unapologetic antagonists, champions of rival ethnic and regional blocs. And some of those developments are still quite recent. Events such as the Tea riots of 1963 exposed the inability of the young republic to manage inclusion, representation, and grievance. Alongside these tensions was a growing sense of Igbo disenchantment, which we cannot run away from, despite the Igbo's strong commitment to pan-Nigerian nationalism, commerce, and mobility across the Federation. In a way, the center could not hold, in part because the central government sought to hold too much. The collapse of political alliances, disputed censuses and elections, and perceptions of marginalization went unaddressed. Losing power came to be seen not as an inherent circle in a democratic process, but as a permanent confinement to the political wilderness. And some of our politicians resisted this. By the mid-1960s, politics had ceased to be about governance. It became a struggle for survival. So we moved from disenchantment to strife, and of course, the Civil War. The coups and counter-coups of 1966 did not create ethnic fear. They were caused by such fears, and they amplified it. Democratic arbitration failed, and suspicion replaced trust. So what followed thereafter? The Nigerian Civil War. A bitter war that was fought for 3 years plus. It was the tragic consequence of a state unstable to assure its constituent groups of fairness, security, and belonging. That war ended in 1970 with the declaration of no victor, no vanquished, a morally powerful statement led by the then General Yakubu Gowon. But the language of reconciliation did not always carry the day, nor could it sweep away all the undemocratic flaws of our political culture. We forged ahead as a country and as a nation. Thankfully, the bloodshed was over, yet the invisible wounds to our collective psyche were not fully treated. So what happened? Post-war reintegration, healing of a nation deferred. While the war ended militarily, its lingering political and psychological consequences have been consequential. Policies such as uniform compensation for lost savings, abandoned property, and uneven reintegration into the power structure, the national power structure, left enduring scars. Over time, exclusion no longer expressed itself through secession, but through disengagement, mistrust, alienation from the federal center. These unresolved grievances became quite fault lines in Nigeria's political development resurfacing periodically in political discourse and national debates. So the years of oil boom came, and at the same time, the seeds of economic decline. Nigerian challenges were not only political, they were also economic and structural. The oil boom of 1970s brought forth sudden wealth unchecked by institutional discipline. Easy oil revenues weakened fiscal responsibility, encouraged rent-seeking, and disconnected governance from productivity. The state became the primary dispenser of wealth rather than the enabler of creative, job-oriented enterprise. Corruption deepened, inflationary pressures emerged, import dependency increased, and of course, by the early 1980s, Nigeria was already living beyond its productive capacity. And I'm sure so many of us can connect with this. Economic legitimacy began to erode alongside political legitimacy. Of course, the Second and the Third Republics, period of economic stress and political collapse, no doubt. The Second Republic, 1979 to 1983, and you will notice deliberately I've left out the names of the dramatis personae. And that's because we want to just focus on the substance. That period inherited a fragile oil-dependent economy, while blatant ethnic politics initially declined under the glaring influence of 13 years of military rule, because they were tempered by the military interregnum that occurred. We saw an attempt to run a proper country. But then, material politics dominated. Fiscal discipline weakened. Inflation rose. External debt mounted. Politics reverted to party over nation. And on December 31, 1983, the military intervened again. Not merely because of politics, but because the economy was failing. When you refer to the cool speeches of the late General Muhammadu Buhari, you can connect. Under military rule, economic distortion deepened as the years went by. Multiple exchange rate systems, access replaced productivity. Abacha's multiple foreign windows entrenched rent extraction. In our country, a minority tribe grew wealthy. The rest of the people watched. Opportunity packed its bag and left elsewhere. By late 1990s, the Nigerian economy was economically exhausted. Now, the Fourth Republic, 1999 to date. Democracy under economic pressure. The Fourth Republic was born into economic fragility. The early 2000s saw militancy in the Niger Delta, driven by resource control grievances, disrupting oil production and national revenue. Although militancy was eventually quelled through political engagement and amnesty, new security economic shocks emerged. Then we had the rise of Boko Haram insecurity that spread in various forms, banditry, devastating economic activity across large swaths of northern Nigeria, disrupting agriculture, trade routes, education, and investment. By the early 2020s, insecurity had become a microeconomic issue, not merely a security concern. As a nation of 220 million people, with a birth rate among the world's highest, Nigeria is still confronted with these challenges. We continue to function under an economic model that barely functioned when our population was half its current size. And recall, within just less than 25 years, Nigeria's population doubled from 120 million to 220 million. But did the state expand in its capacities and the structure of governance? No, we did not expand at the same pace with the population growth we had. Hence where we are today. So, still on the Fourth Republic, by the time President Bola Ahmed Tinubu assumed office in 2023, Nigeria faced severe inflation, forex market distortion, declining productivity, rising debt, weakened investor confidence, and widespread economic hardship. Nigeria's economy was marked by inertia, some level of incoherence, by consumption, not productivity, and of course, the fuel subsidy that bled the nation. All of that story is well told. The ways and means, 30 trillion ways and means, the level of financial recklessness at unprecedented, inflation at 36.46%. So President Tinubu had his job cut out from the very first day. So this brings us to the crux. What is working in the Fourth Republic? And I dare say I will just touch on a few, because I know the other speakers will also take on some of these issues. In assessing what is working in the Fourth Republic, we must measure democratic gains, not sentiment. The Fourth Republic's achievements must be assessed through institutional and performance indicators, not rhetoric. First, civilian supremacy and democratic longevity. And just 26 years of uninterrupted years of civilian rule. For those that were alive and were active participants in the military, the era of military dictatorship, from Babangida to Abacha to Abdusalami Abubakar, you will know that being under democratic rule is far better than being under military rule. So 26 years, that is working. Civilian supremacy is also working. Important. Electoral and judicial institutionalization. Since 1999, over 80% of major electoral disputes have been resolved through the courts rather than extra constitutional means. And Kabisi, you are a living testimony. An elected president shoved you out of office. You went to the courts put you back in office. We remember that very well. It was a watershed. INEC has evolved technologically and procedurally, while courts now routinely overturn executive and legislative process. We've had the expansion of civil space, and we've had people speak about that. Voters register increased, civil society robust. We've also had media and accountability pressure. Nigeria ranks amongst Africa's top countries in media reach. Continuous scrutiny has imposed reputational and political cost on failure. That is to say, the feet of those in power is being held to the fire to be accountable. And this has halted elite behavior in ways earlier republics never experienced. Welcome to the era and the regime of the social media as watchdogs. We've seen policy continuity. For the first time in the Fourth Republic, we've seen efforts at policy continuity, budget continuity, and so many others. So what is not working? The public trust, that barometer, there's a gap. Afro barometer surveys show fewer than 35% of Nigerians consistently trust the federal government. And trust in political parties often falls below 25%. This deficit is experiential, rooted in lived economic hardships. And we need to do a better job in making sure all Nigerians feel and trust the government that serves them. Subnational governance failure. Over 60% of states spend more than 70% of revenues on recurrent expenditures, in spite of increase in revenue that goes to them. Economic stress. Inflation peaked over the last 30 years, not just in the last 3 years. In the last 20 years, we have seen a steady increase of inflation. Youth unemployment and underemployment exceeding 40% at various points in the Fourth Republic. Democracy weakens when livelihoods collapse. And by late 2025, thankfully, signs of recovery became visible. but we must accelerate and deepen the economic recovery of our country. The issue of security is a 10-pound gorilla in the room for all the presidents that have ruled this country in the Fourth Republic. Insurgency, kidnapping, banditry, displacement of farmers, etc. Of course, we're seeing recent security measures helping to curb insecurity. Then we have weak national cohesion. I move to the last part. Nigeria's Fourth Republic again, under President Tinubu, the audacity of Tinubu. And I said it, we've had President Obasanjo, we've had President Yar'Adua, we've had President Jonathan, we've had President Muhammadu Buhari, and then right now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Each of these presidents will fall on his own sword on the basis of his performance. The person we have now in situ is President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who did not inherit a neutral economy. In fact, he did not inherit a perfect economy. He inherited a structurally unjust system marked by elite currency arbitrage, subsidy capture, and fiscal indiscipline. He dared to pull the trigger on the subsidy on oil and subsidy on forex. He unleashed a regime of reforms in several sectors of the economy. By unifying the exchange rate, removing fuel subsidies, and restoring fiscal discipline, President Tinubu corrected not just economic distortions, but democratic ones. So, what are the signs of recovery we're seeing in the Fourth Republic under this president? They are writ large. Inflation, 9 months of consecutive drop of inflation, now at 15%. GDP growth, the latest, from the World Bank 3 days ago, from 4.1 to 4.4. 6.1 billion non-oil trade surplus, shows reduced import dependence and improved competitiveness. External reserves, now at 43 billion. Nigeria's removal from FATF restored institutional credibility. Currency arbitrage gone. We're seeing fiscal transparency. Balance of trade is now about 18 billion. Balance of payments now stands about 8 billion. Ways and means has been securitized. Subsidy removal, we've saved between 10 to 15 billion annually. Our rating from S&P and Moody, B3, Fitch is stable. Petroleum production up from 900 to 1.5, 1.6. We have the 1.1 billion Nigerian-Brazil Agric Initiative, and I can go on and on. Every single sector is experiencing reform. Social safety net, which is critical, and I must talk about that. 8.5 million households have benefited from 330 billion. The JIP, 50,000 to over 1 million recipients. NEL Fund, a revolution for our young people, 140 billion, 900,000 plus of our young people. Credit Corps, bringing about a credit society. Over 100,000 Nigerians have benefited. Infrastructure across the length and breadth of Nigeria in every geopolitical zone. We see clear evidence of road construction. Over 270 roads are being constructed. 4 legacy projects are ongoing. Health centers, over 1,200 health centers are being revitalized. The list goes on. Conclusion. I can see the MC by my right. Unity, reform, and democratic maturity. Nigeria's history teaches a clear lesson. Soldiers entered politics when civilian leadership failed politically and economically. The Fourth Republic has endured because it is learning, sometimes painfully, to correct itself from within. Reform is not anti-democratic. Reform is democracy's insurance policy. Under this administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, unity is being pursued through systemic reforms and corrections by dismantling privilege, restoring fairness, and rebuilding economic credibility. And this unity is not an event. It is a continuous policy choice. Nigeria's future depends on leadership willing to reform systems, confront historical grievances, honesty, and build a democracy that works, not for some, but for all Nigerians. So what is the verdict on Nigeria's Fourth Republic? From former President Obasanjo to Yar'Adua to Goodluck Jonathan to late President Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria has witnessed incremental efforts and nation building. But note this, like I said earlier, every leader falls on his own sword or performance. Therefore, Nigeria in the Fourth Republic is on a firm path of recovery. Under the watch of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Nigeria is witnessing economic renewal due to a robust microeconomic sequencing by the president. There are commitment and, of course, purpose. Nigeria is addressing some of its developmental demons, though too much politicking seems to foul the air and distract. This government is focused on delivering good governance. The journey is not without its challenges, sacrifices, mistakes, and bumps. And that is why this morning I urge all Nigerians to join hands with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in this Fourth Republic to make a greater Nigeria a possibility. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Solidari. Can we do better with a round of applause? Thank you. Some would say, or maybe I should just say, I would say, historically, analytical, contemporarily pro-APC, and I think it is to be expected. Let's meet our next guest speaker, the woman who would soften the blow and maybe not. Please, your attention, your excellencies, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, let's meet our next speaker.
Honorable Nnenna Ijoma Elendu Okeje is a seasoned legislator and one of the most experienced female voices to emerge from Nigeria's Fourth Republic. Elected in 2007 to represent Bende Federal Constituency in Abia State, she served 3 consecutive terms in the House of Representatives, earning re-election in 2011 and again in 2015. She chaired the House Committee on Foreign Affairs twice, a rare distinction that placed her at the center of Nigeria's parliamentary diplomacy and international engagement. Before politics, she built a career in the private sector, bringing management discipline into public service. Her background reflects public duty, daughter of a former Air Force pilot and a retired Chief Judge of the Federal High Court. In Parliament, Okeje became a strong advocate for affirmative action and gender parity, often working under pressure in a male-dominated space. She contributed to key legislation on minimum wage, financial intelligence, asset forfeiture, anti-money laundering, disability rights, and non-discrimination. Direct, resilient, and policy-driven, Nnenna Elendu Okeje represents experience, legislative depth, and quiet determination. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, your guest speaker, Honorable Nnenna Elendu Okeje.
Politician. And when they were asked why, they said because they make a lot of noise and don't work very well. After 3 decades of military interventions and dominance, a convergence of anti-military forces, pro-democracy civil society organizations, determined Nigerian citizens, and international pressure groups would ensure that the dream of a democratic Nigeria was actualized to great hope and expectations of newfound freedoms and all the celebrated gains of self-rule. This achievement was probably the most consequential democratic experience of the Global South. A period of great global power peace gave rise to the growth of globalism and multilateralism, which fostered cooperation and strengthened the Anglo-American consensus of global governance. Nigeria would be a beneficiary of that new world order. Over 2 decades, the world has witnessed a stealth period of democratic recession, which to many was almost imperceptible. Democratic principles were slightly being remodified to the point where a critical re-examination is required as the underpinnings of our views on democratic institutions, rules, and ethos are being redefined most disruptively. The thought-provoking speech of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, at the World Economic Forum in Davos recently, was the big bang that seems to have shaken us all out of our reverie and caused us to seriously interrogate what we knew democracy to be, as well as to honestly assess our preparedness for the emerging new world order. Ladies and gentlemen, management and board of Daily Trust, I'm truly honored to be a part of the assemblage of eminent individuals invited to interrogate the health of our democratic experiment. I shall speak to the growing gaps between politics and governance today, which has become the defining challenge to Nigeria's Fourth Republic. Remaining optimistic, I shall try to challenge the doomsday quote by John Quincy Adams, the second president of the United States, which says, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States of America, says, and I quote, "Democracy is never a final achievement. It's a call to untiring effort." We are confronted with questionable electoral integrity, the proliferation of illiberal democracies and constitutional overreach in the African sub-region, the increasing incidence and popularity of military coups, as well as the security, stability, and prosperity of non-democratic countries such as China, Singapore, and the UAE increase our quandary. The superior qualities of democracy are under scrutiny. Will our untiring efforts in Nigeria, according to JFK, challenge the death prophecy, according to John Adams? Statistics from the Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance state that globally, 58% of adults are dissatisfied with democracy. In Nigeria, a significant and growing number, over 70%, are dissatisfied with how democracy actually functions in the country, seeing it as flawed or poorly implemented, and many believing elections don't reflect their views or remove bad leaders. Yes, Nigerians vote, but accountability remains weak. Institutions are not rules-based, public confidence in leadership is declining, and voter turnout has steadily dropped, reflecting growing political disillusionment. Voter turnout in Nigeria's presidential elections have declined sharply over recent years, from 52% in 1999 to 46% in 2015, and then 35% in 2019 to a dismal 26.7% in 2023, reflecting continued disengagement from the electoral process. Now on to the good news. Access to quality education, house care, housing and social protection remains uneven. Nigeria has one of the highest numbers of out-of-school children globally, estimated at 18 million. Health indicators lag behind peer countries. Social policies often react to crises rather than preventing them. Nigeria's population is young, energetic, and ambitious, yet grossly underutilized. When human potential is wasted, democratic hope weakens, brain drain and limited opportunities threaten long-term productivity. However, for the Fourth Republic, as highlighted by the speaker before me, it's not all gloom and doom. There are some highlights. With the GSM and ICT, and the democratization of information for new avenues for new wealth creation, our democracy has become more accountable by expanding citizens' opportunities to freedom of interrogation, expression, and association. Mobilization and organization for citizens' engagement to oppressive government policies became more effective and impactful. I can't think of a better example than the End SARS movement. Citizen advocacy is on the rise. People like Martins, also a very dark man, Precious, Mama P, lead the charge in that area, and their voices are loud and projected every day. Economically, digital content creators have brought immense value to the Nigerian economy, creating millions of jobs, exporting Nigeria's culture globally, and providing new avenues for socioeconomic expression. The creative industry in Nigeria's Fourth Republic, film, art, food, has grown from a largely informal sector to the country's second largest employer after agriculture. Nigeria's fashion and literary arts have contributed approximately 1.73 billion to the Nigerian economy. Everybody has spoken about an unbroken chain of transfer of democratic power through 8 cycles, from one ruling political party, the PDP, to a previously opposition coalition party, the APC, without interruptions, either by coups or extrajudicial changes. That should be cheery news. But is it? Unfortunately, democracy is not only about the ballot box. Democracy is not validated by longevity alone, it is validated by outcomes. Our democratic experiment raises its own credibility questions. The independence of the umpire, INEC, the shrinking of the political space, the heightened intolerance of any viable opposition, and the decline of multi-party political systems by the incessant defections. There are allegations that Nigeria dances dangerously on the brink of becoming a one-party state. The only challenge that rests on the belief that our diversity will prove such attempted monolithic control near impossible. But we shall wait and see. What is not working? The governability of our democracy is exposing huge gaps. To understand our strengths and failures, we must first query what is elections, what is governance, and why confusing the two has become costly. Elections is about winning power. It's a means to an end, while governance is about using power responsibly and effectively. Governance is long-term planning, it's institutional defense and growth, it is policy formation and implementation, it is service delivery, and it is most definitely accountability. While elections are episodic, governance is continuous. Elections ask who should lead, governance answers how society should be run. Elections creates authority, governance creates outcomes. The paradox of the Fourth Republic is that while politics is and continues to be extremely vibrant, our democracy is fragile, our governance is receding. Democracy simply appears unable to solve the country's major problems of rising widespread insecurity and eradication of multidimensional poverty, which, as Mr. Dari said, was inherited, but which seems to clearly have overwhelmed the leadership of the country, and I will highlight. Amidst declining public finance accountability and profligacy amongst us, the political class, according to the World Bank reports of 2025, over 75% of Nigerians live below the United Nations poverty threshold of $2 per day, translating to over 133 million people who are said to be living in multidimensional poverty, a steep rise from 87 million in 2018, with a new PricewaterhouseCoopers report projecting that 141 million people would have transmitted to the multidimensional poverty trap by the end of 2026. More disturbing statistics from NDIC confirmed by the Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edu, states that only 2% of the 70 million bank account holders have more than 500,000 naira, or the value of $350 in their accounts. Democracy, sadly, has clearly not translated to economic security. The quest for nation building and cohesion has proven to be a major challenge, with our fault lines magnified by our socioeconomic disparities. This polarization with its ethnic and religious leanings clearly predate the Fourth Republic, but has been exacerbated over time by vicious politics and entrenched inequalities. Partisan traditional media, distrust in institutions, and technological tools like social media and artificial intelligence spewing hate speech and violence, computational propaganda, deepfakes, and imagery. Nigerians today do not only speak about the traditionally perceived inequity between the north and the south of Nigeria. As we inch closely towards the election cycle, the recurrent north-south conversations are again beginning to rear their heads, but this time with a more divisive twist. For the first time, more people are beginning to engage in the micro-equity and the southern contiguity conversations, probably as a result of the perceptions of skewed distribution of resources arising from the widely held touted beliefs that the Southwest benefits unfairly at the expense of other composite parts of the southern regions like the Southeast and the South-South. Our democracy obviously has not learned to walk the narrow corridors of creating a state strong enough to ensure stability amidst democratically guaranteed institutional reforms such as freedom of expression, even though we touted freedom of association. There is a joke that says you have freedom of expression, is what happens to you afterwards that there is no guarantee for. Repression has become increasingly fashionable, liberal populism seems to be on the rise, and the rule of law seems to be in retreat. Kabiesi, with the utmost respect, you spoke about gender inclusion, and I shall speak about gender inclusion. Unfortunately, our views differ ever so slightly. No honest assessment can ignore gender disparities in political and leadership representation. There is a Chinese saying that you can't hold up the sky with one hand. Nigeria has a historically low representation of women in political office, generally under 6%, and was ranked 139th out of 156 countries in gender equality matrix, with 14 women out of 360 members in the House of Representatives and only 4 females out of 109 senators. Nigeria falls significantly below the African regional average of roughly 23.4% and the global average of 26.1% for women in parliament. 15 out of 36 states in Nigeria operate their legislature with 0 female representation. When half the population is underrepresented in decision-making, development, and governance, outcomes inevitably suffer. This is not merely a gender issue, it is governance failure. Evidence consistently shows that societies that include women in leadership experience better social outcomes, stronger community trust, more sustainable development. A democracy that marginalizes women weakens itself. The period between 1999 and 2003 surpassed the prescribed 35% in appointive positions and witnessed women holding very strategic cabinet positions and delivering excellently on their mandate. The evidence is not abstract. Nigeria itself provides counterfactual. When Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was appointed Minister of finance, Nigeria was burdened by over 30 billion in external debt, with debt servicing consuming a crippling share of national revenue and crowding out spending on development. Through disciplined fiscal management, institutional reform, and one of the most complex sovereign negotiations in modern history, her leadership culminated in a landmark 18 billion debt relief deal with the Paris Club in 2005. That single outcome reduced Nigeria's debt stock by over 60%, freed billions of dollars annually for social infrastructure spending, restored international credibility to Nigeria's public finance system. This is not symbolic inclusion, it was measurable national gain. The lesson is clear that when Nigeria entrusted a woman with real authority over critical institutions, the result was not optics, it was outcomes. It was not propaganda, it was felt in our homes. Legislative interventions, such as the Special Seats Bill, which has been presented in the last three assemblies, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th assemblies, have failed to get the desired legislative votes to achieve the affirmative action required to close the embarrassing gender gaps. The National Assembly will do well to seize this opportunity to etch its name glowingly in the annals of Nigeria's history by passing the Special Seats Bill to allow for more female participation in governance. Nigeria's development depends on it. On to the institutions. The Nigerian judiciary has a 21% approval rating. A new report by the Africa Polling Institute has found that 79% of Nigerians have little or no trust in the country's judiciary, citing concerns like political influence, inefficiency, delay in the judicial process, and erosion of integrity. Ironically, this appears to contrast sharply with known cases of bold judges who stood against authoritarian actions during the military era. Justice Nikki Toby, Justice of the Supreme Court of Blessed Memory, puts it succinctly, and I shall quote, "While politics as a profession is totally based on partiality, judgeship as a profession is fully and totally based on impartiality, the opposite of partiality. Their waters must never meet in the same way that rivers Niger and Benue meet at the conference in Lokoja. If they meet, the victim will be democracy. Most of the time, that will be bad for sovereign Nigeria. We need democracy, not despotism, oligarchy, and totalitarianism. Judges should on no account dance to the music played by politicians, because that will completely destroy their role as independent umpires in the judicial process. This, in my opinion, should be the new template for the judiciary in Nigeria's fledgling democracy. I see you're coming near me, but I must speak about the legislature. I will not leave until I do. I'm sorry, apologies. The legislature, the problems that confront the Nigerian legislature are tetra-headed. It battles weak legislative support systems and high attrition rate. The National Assembly records an average of 75% in legislators' turnover since the Fourth Republic. Consequently, there is no institutional memory. In 26 years, the legislature as an institution has struggled constantly to find its true relevance and independence in the tri-party spectre of democratic governance. The bastion of our democracy is the only institution in government that echoes the voice of the people. The duty of the legislature is to mitigate usurpation of authority and accumulation of power in one person. When performed optimally, it checks unilateral executive action. Between 2005 and 2006, an independent legislature voted against a constitutional amendment that sought to extend the tenure of an administration beyond the prescribed term limits. In 2010, the legislature invoked the controversial doctrine of necessity to proffer a political solution at a turbulent time in our nation's history. In the quest to entrench legislative independence, the National Assembly, in a well-publicized act of defiance with the chairman as the dramatis personae, unfortunately, I must call your name, resisted executive interference in the choice of the leadership and experienced probably the most vibrant assembly to date. This was a period that symbolized mutual respect, greater accountability, better representation, and more robust citizen participation. Those were the 7th and the 8th assemblies, and I'm proud to have been part of them. Sadly, the National Assembly seems to have yielded the hard-fought independence. There exists overraking executive dominance, probably as a result of interference in the emergence of the leadership of the 10th Assembly, which has earned them the unkind sobriquet from the Nigerian public, the rubber stamp assembly. The integrity of the National Assembly's actors and actions have never been called more to question, as recently when one of the core functions of the legislature, lawmaking, came under scrutiny amidst alleged distortions, inclusions, and forgeries, and someone or people or institutions acting ultra-virus post assent of a critical piece of legislation, the Nigerian tax law. This, for the first time in our history, sadly calls to question the integrity of the laws that have been passed recently. With regards to oversight, another core function of the National Assembly, people question the inability to fund capital projects. The 3-year cumulative budget deficit exceeding 50 trillion naira. The 2026 fiscal deficit of 23.85 trillion naira and debt service obligations of 15.2 trillion naira, which exceed the combined budget allocation of defense and security at a time where our country is almost crippled by insecurity, education, and health budgets combined. People worry that the midterm expenditure framework and the Appropriation Act are blind to the details of the much-touted Lagos-Calabar coastal highway in spite of its staggering cost. Furthermore, Nigerians understandably are concerned about the leadership selection process, worry about the abuse of the confirmation powers of the executive positions in the Nigerian Senate. The National Assembly seems to have abandoned all pretense of neutrality, and the people question not only their performance, but their competence. In conclusion, without doubt, our country is exhibiting the warning signs of democratic fatigue. Voter apathy, youth disengagement, separatist tensions, and rising cynicism are warning signs. With more liberal voices silenced, we are confronted with the rise of populism and sycophantic allegiance to man, not state. A sad reality is highlighted by the fact that those who wish to push the very elastic limits of our democracy are weaponizing and deploying the very institutions that should uphold and sustain our democracy. The ardor starts to prove that democracy can still deliver better than any other alternatives depends on the critical shift from democracy as power acquisition to democracy as service and governance. We, the people, must be reminded that it is not only permissible to hold government to account, it is our duty. We must stop looking away from the fact that the Titanic of state has hit an iceberg. We must stop dancing to the loud music of elections and start to look to the lifeboats of governance. We all, the tripod of the elected, the citizens, and gatekeepers made up of media, civil society, and the judiciary, with the political parties, Mr. Chairman, sir, I'm talking to you, with the political parties acting as filters, must recommit to personal, institutional, and systemic reforms. We must unlearn the retrogressive habits and position our country to acquire new rules of governance that will help us survive and dominate the revolutionary change that is upon us. In the words of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, he said, "If we're not on the table, then we are on the menu." We must breach the trust deficit between the elected and governed. We must demand transparency from the elected and resist the constitutional overreach of the executive. We must defend the integrity of strong state institutions. And finally, we must insist on a respected, impartial judicial system. A unified vision in our collective quest for security, good governance, prosperity, inclusiveness, and accountability must be the absolute barest minimum. Embracing our diversity is non-negotiable if we intend to build a prosperous nation in today's world. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nena Elendu Ukeje, for that moving speech. I can tell that her co-panelist, Mr. Sundidare, was already plotting his counterattack for the panel session. All right, to complete the quartet, actually the trio, let's meet someone who needs very little or no introduction, especially for the much older generation. But seeing that we have students amongst us, there are very few people who would say that this name does not ring a bell. He is joining us virtually much later for the panel discussion, as explained earlier. But for those who need some sort of introduction to our next guest speaker, your attention to the screens, please.
Malam Nasir Al-Rufai has been a public servant shaped by reform and driven by strong opinions. A trained quantity surveyor and policy thinker, he rose to national prominence as Director General of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, where he pushed market reforms and challenged state control of the economy. As Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, he gained a reputation for toughness, enforcing the Abuja Master Plan, restoring order to land administration, and insisting that rules must matter. Between 2015 and 2023, he served 2 terms as governor of Kaduna State, focusing on education reform, public finance discipline, digital governance, and internal revenue growth. His style was direct, often controversial, but firmly rooted in policy choices rather than popularity. Malam Nasir Al-Rufai is known for speaking plainly, questioning orthodoxy, and pushing uncomfortable conversations about governance, federalism, and political accountability in Nigeria. Today, he remains one of the country's most outspoken voices on leadership and public policy. Your Excellencies, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, our guest speaker at the 23rd Daily Trust Dialogue, Malam Nasir Al-Rufai.
Distinguished panelists, honored guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by apologizing for my physical absence from this important dialogue. I was recently treated for a sudden bacterial and viral infection and remained under medical observation until midweek, which prevented my travel to Abuja yesterday. I therefore address you today from Brussels in Belgium before returning to Nigeria shortly, inshallah. I thank the Trust newspapers for the honor of inviting me to speak at this 23rd Daily Trust Dialogue. The theme, Nigeria's Fourth Republic, what is working and what is not, is timely not because the Republic is young, but because it is old enough to be judged honestly against the expectations that gave it birth. So let me begin by framing the question. Nigeria's Fourth Republic is now in its 27th year. It represents the longest uninterrupted stretch of civilian rule since independence in 1960. That fact alone matters. We have conducted multiple elections, transferred power between parties, sustained constitutional rule, and resisted the return of military governance despite insurgency, economic shocks, recessions, and a global pandemic. This endurance deserves recognition. It reflects not only the actions of politicians and institutions, but also the patience and democratic commitment of ordinary Nigerians. However, endurance is not the same as progress. Stability is not the same as prosperity. And elections alone do not equal good governance. The central question before us is this: has the Fourth Republic delivered security, justice, opportunity, and dignity to the majority of Nigerians? My short answer is this: it has delivered some gains, but it is failing in fundamental ways. I will therefore make 5 propositions. First, the Fourth Republic has recorded some real achievements. Second, it is democratic in form, but increasingly centralized and coercive in substance. Third, its failures are structural, not accidental. Fourth, the binding constraint is not democracy itself, but weak state capacity and poor leadership quality of political office holders. And fifth, unless these failures are addressed, public faith, especially among young Nigerians, will continue to erode with serious consequences for the survival of the Fourth Republic. So let me begin with what I think is working about this republic. Number one, in my view, is civilian continuity. Since 1999, Nigeria has remained under civilian rule. Courts sit, legislatures function, governments change through election and not coups. In an African context, this is no small achievement. Military rule has largely lost legitimacy as a solution to Nigeria's problem. This alone is progress. Number two, federal pluralism. Nigeria remains a federation, strained, imperfect, but still plural. Some state governments matter. Governors remain powerful political actors. Subnational governments deliver most education and healthcare services and employ the majority of public servants in Nigeria. This pluralism has prevented complete political monopoly and allowed pockets of success in some states, even where the center fails. The third is political competition. Nigeria does not have a permanent ruling party, and that is an achievement compared to countries like Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and even our neighbor, Benin and Togo. The PDP governed for 16 years. The APC will not govern forever. It is likely that in 2027, the APC will be gone. Power, therefore, remains contestable. This distinguishes Nigeria from dominant party systems elsewhere on the continent, some of the countries that I've mentioned. However, and this is critical, competition has not yet matured into accountability and good governance. Elite circulation has outpaced institutional consolidation. Parties remain weak, personality-driven, and transactional. The fourth is selective economic and industrial gains. Nigeria has experienced episodic progress. There were years of growth driven by macroeconomic discipline and infrastructure investment. Nigeria became a net exporter of cement, thanks to Dangote and other cement manufacturers. The Dangote refinery positions us towards self-sufficiency in refined petroleum, petrochemicals, and fertilizer. Again, that is progress. These are not imaginary achievements. They demonstrate that democracy, when focused, can deliver, but they are uneven, fragile, and easily reversed. I will now go to what is not working. Now let us turn to clearly to what is clearly not working, and here a bit of candor is required. The first is we have governance without accountability. Nigeria has built the forms of accountability faster than in the substance. We conduct elections, create agencies, announce asset recoveries, but accountability by those governing remains selective and episodic. Corruption has become dangerous for some that are in opposition, negotiable for others that are sitting on the fence and want to move to the APC, and invisible for those aligned with power. APC members are never accused of corruption. This cost is not abstract. It appears in unpaid salaries, abandoned projects, decaying infrastructure, and widespread cynicism. When laws are enforced unevenly, deterrence collapses. And when deterrence collapses, trust evaporates. And this is what is happening in Nigeria today. The second thing that is not working is what I call centralization without capacity. Nigeria operates one of the most centralized fiscal systems among federations, yet expects states and local governments to deliver most frontline and critical services like primary education and healthcare. Authority, responsibility, and funding are badly misaligned. This is not an accident. It is a design flaw, one that contradicts the 1954 federal consensus for a loose federation with strong regions and a limited center that our founding fathers agreed in the UK. Since 1966, successive governments, military and civilian, have entrenched this unitary federalism. The result is predictable. Everyone looks up to Abuja for money, looks downwards for excuses, and sideways for scapegoats to blame. A system that centralizes power but diffuses responsibility will always fail by design. But by design means we can fix it. The third is insecurity and the breakdown of the social contract. Insecurity remains Nigeria's gravest crisis. Insurgency, banditry, kidnappings, and communal violence have displaced millions and devastated livelihoods. Despite rising security budgets, the state's monopoly of force has weakened. When citizens are compelled to organize their own protection, that is not resilience. It is a vote of no confidence in the Nigerian state. No republic can endure when security becomes a private commodity available only to those who can afford it. The fourth area that is not working is economic hardship and inequality. Nigeria may record GDP growth, and you will hear today from the government representative talking about over 4% projected GDP growth for 2026. But the lived reality is harsh and different from this rosy picture. Poverty remains widespread. Inflation, especially food inflation, has destroyed purchasing power. Policy shocks have accumulated without buffers. What distinguishes Nigeria is not hardship alone, but hardship without accountability, where citizens absorb every shock, while public officials and political office holders live extravagantly and with impunity. This breeds anger, and anger, when combined with frustration and hopelessness, is politically dangerous. The fifth area where things aren't working is law, justice, and democratic erosion. The law should protect citizens, not terrify them. Yet, we have seen in Nigeria prolonged detention, selective prosecution, and investigative fishing expeditions that have weakened confidence in the justice system. When law enforcement is weaponized against political competitors, democracy erodes quietly but steadily, and this is what we've seen happening in our country today. The courts remain the last refuge of anyone that feels persecuted. But when justice is doubted, when judges are compromised, the republic itself is weakened. What must change and must stop, I will go into now. If the Fourth Republic is to move beyond mere survival, it must now be judged by outcomes, not longevity. Nigeria must shift from consumption to production, from centralization of power to true federalism, where devolution of power goes to the states and local governments, and from power without responsibility to authority matched with accountability. Specifically, Nigeria must end borrowing for recurrent expenditure and prioritize food security. We must reform the constitution and allow state and community policing. We must devolve resource control and economic authority to the states. For instance, mining and minerals should be devolved to the states because the states control land, among other things. We must also strengthen our institutions through judicial reform and ensure that we have credible elections through an truly independent electoral commission. We must invest seriously in health and education at the lowest levels. And finally, we must restore ethical and competent governance for our politics to have meaning. But reform is not only about what must change, it is also about what must stop. We must stop the weaponization of security agencies, law enforcement, regulatory institutions, and the justice system for regime protection rather than for democratic preservation. Selective enforcement of laws must end. Arrests without evidence must end. Detention before investigation must end. Governing by intimidation rather than institutions must end. So let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, with this. Nigeria's Fourth Republic has bought us time, but time alone is not legacy. We have the architecture of democracy, but its foundation is cracking under the weight of insecurity, exclusion, and widespread economic hardship. History teaches us a hard lesson that when reform is postponed indefinitely, as we are seeing in Nigeria today, rupture and collapse eventually arrive. The choice before us as politicians is not stability, but reform. It is reform now or instability sooner or later. Nigerians are not lacking intelligence, patriotism, or resilience, so let us not blame Nigerians for the current state of affairs. What Nigerians lack is accountability from those entrusted with power. And as opposition, we are not enemies of the state. We are the conscience of the people. We seek reform, renewal, and a democracy that delivers, not one that survives by coercion and selective persecution. I invite all those who wish Nigeria well to join us in restoring hope, dignity, and progress through reform, through progress, and societal consolidation, not repression, not selective persecution. Thank you very much. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I hope to take your questions during the question and answer session.
Keynote speakers delivering his pre-recorded speech. As he did point out, he will be a part of the panel discussion that will be coming up just moments from now. He's already online and awaiting that particular segment to kick off. And we will, of course, like anyone who has a message, a question, a recommendation, to please prepare them beforehand, because we're trying to make the most from whatever time we have left, so that we can save ourselves the stress of having to go from row to row, giving microphones around for people to make their contributions. So if you feel like articulating your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions, please do so ahead of time.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to continue recognizing some of our guests, and this recognition is in no particular order. Now, first off, I'd like to recognize Comrade Ini Ememobong, National Publicity Secretary, the People's Democratic Party, representing the National Chairman, PDP, Dr. Kabiru Tanimu Taraki. Thank you for being here. We have Ahmed Balarab Saidu, the Kaduna Chapter Secretary of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR. Thank you for being here. And next up, we have Felix Hala from the German Embassy. Thank you for being here. All right, now moving on. At this point, we take a short pause to recognize service that often goes unnoticed. If you would kindly turn your attention to the screens, we will be displaying some recognition for our unsung heroes to present the 2025 Daily Trust Unsung Hero. Thank you very much.
Daily Trust's Unsung Hero of the Year is not about profit, it is about purpose. Daily Trust's Unsung Hero of the Year is not about profit, it is about purpose, giving back and making a difference. While many chased private school money, one man chose the poor. In 1977, in Jos, Plateau State, Musa Ibrahim Sagagi opened a school so children wouldn't be locked out of learning. He charged very little, sometimes nothing. When fees failed, he paid teachers with stipends. When money ran out, he sold part of his inheritance. Muslims, Christians, no lines drawn, no child sent home. today, his students are professors, judges, doctors, and many more. Nigeria is better because he stayed the course. This is sacrifice without applause. This is service without headlines. Daily Trust's unsung hero of the year, Musa Ibrahim Sagagi. Because some heroes build people, not empires.
Present the award, His Imperial Majesty Oba Rashidi Aderulu Ladoja Olubadan of Ibadan land. And joining him to present and accompany him to present the award is Chairman of the occasion, Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, as well as the Chairman of Media Trust, Malam Kabiri Yusuf.
Giving him the award?
Just a moment as the award is presented.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Come here, I was wondering.
And that's
Madam, on behalf of the Media Trust, publishers of the Media Trust, I hereby present this award in recognition of your role as an unsung hero. From nothing, turning out professors, doctors, on their own effort. Thank you very much for all those.
Thank you very much. I realize.
This is your check. Once again, congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. I realize.
All right, thank you very much, Your Imperial Majesty and Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, for presenting this award. It is not an easy feat to have a philanthropical heart as well as serve the people. Now, at this point, some of his students are here and they begged for a couple of minutes to express their gratitude towards him at this moment. Can we have them up here so that they can do that quickly?
Any need to say something? I don't think we just want to quickly, not less than a minute, as even this thing is going on, if you like.
Okay, go ahead. Quickly.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Mohammed Tijani Babagangari. I am the Director, French National Defense College, Nigeria. I am one of the products of Mala Musa Ibrahim Sagagi. I have successfully risen to the rank of Director at National Defense College, Nigeria. As a result of what we were able to receive, the scholarship he gave us in Jos, and I'm happy to tell you that Mala Musa Ibrahim Sagagi has contributed immensely to educational development of not only male child, but even the girl child is well represented by as the beneficiaries of the scholarship he gave us. Some of these products, as you can see here, they are professors in Nigerian universities. Some of them are PhD holders, like my humble self. A lot of people are into private practice and what have you. Out of some of his pupils, people he sponsored, I regret to inform this gathering that Mala Musa sold his personal house, his cars, his landed property acquired, he inherited in order to give the child the necessary education needed in Jos. So I want us to appreciate Mala Musa, and some of his products are, among others, you can see a very senior police officer here, a CSP. He was also part of people who enjoyed his largesse. We have Professor Adamu Binchin, who is currently the Dean, School of Arts and Dean, Faculty of Arts, National State University. We have Professor Abubakar. We have a Deputy Chief Imam, National Mosque Abuja. We have Professor Usman A. Manu, University of Abuja. We have the late Provost, FCT College of Education, Dr. Gambahanza, among others. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are really grateful. We want to appreciate Media Trust for such recognition. May Allah continue to bless you, and we recognize such people. Thank you very much, and we once again thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for that. In the continuation of recognition, we have Professor Tenna Emelonye, former United Nations Envoy, Bournemouth University, United Kingdom. Thank you for your presence.
All right. I know the Old Boys Association are excited about the recipient, but we have to make haste with the time. So if we can just wait for the photo opportunities until when we are done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if we could just clear the stage. If we could just clear the stage. If we could just clear the stage. Thank you. Thank you very much. If we could just clear the stage. So, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, please, if we can all be seated, please. Let's be seated, please. Let's be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Let's not crowd the little space that we have. Please, let's be seated. Yes, yes. Can we all please be seated? Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please take your seats. Please take your seats. Okay. I would like to, for the limited time available, because we want to open up the conversation as much as we can before we wrap things up, call to the stage our panel members so we can kickstart the deliberations, which will last for some 15 minutes so that we can accommodate as many contributions as we can before we call it a day. So I'd like to call back to the stage Honorable Nnenna Elendu Wikeje to please come to the stage. Mr. Sondedare, please, if you can take your seat at the stage. Mr. Sondedare, to the podium, please. Honorable Nnenna, if we can have you back on the stage.
If we can have your attention and we beg your pardon.
Please
go back to your seat,
and
afterwards we can have as much photo sessions as we want.
Can we please take our seats? Please take your seats. Hello, please. Now is not a good time to exchange pleasantries, please. Okay, thank you very much. So, for want of time, we're going to have to, and this time around, I'm actually speaking to our panel, try to make the most of the 15 minutes or so that we have available to us to touch base once again. Some of the issues that you've expressed earlier in your speeches have well been covered, but we'd like to just double down on some of those other issues just to provide some sort of clarity and context to the conversation we are having today. And can we confirm if Malam Nasir El-Rufai is live for us on Zoom? Okay, good to know. Right, so let's start this way with Honorable Nnenna. I mean, you've talked a lot about the National Assembly itself as an institution, the role it's supposed to play, the gaps that currently exist. Since 1999, we've seen the National Assembly become much more powerful. Has it used that power well, if you have to consider everything that happened between 1999 to date?
Well, the National Assembly is supposed to be powerful. It's supposed to be powerful to the extent that it collates the aggregate opinion of a critical mass of the Nigerian people, and it's the only bastion of our democracy that stands in the gap literally between the executive and the people. Now, over the years, like I said, there's been ebbs and there's been flows. There was a period from 1999 where the twin legacies of militarism and suppression ensured that the National Assembly was still finding its feet. Fast forward to a couple of years, like I pointed out in my address, there was the struggle of finding its feet in that tri-party, because every time there's a coup d'etat, the executive remains, the judiciary remains, the first person that goes is the National Assembly, they suspend the constitution, and so it's no longer constitutional democracy. And so even the transition from militarism to civilian rule the National Assembly struggled a bit, okay? And that struggle was by determined men and women to ensure that they stamped their place in the tri-party. Now, over the years, what happened, like I posited in my paper, that the National Assembly in 1990, 2005, was so independent, and I don't think powerful is the word. I think independent is the word we're looking for here. It was so independent, and it had its hands literally on the pulse of the Nigerian people. The Nigerian people did not want a third term. The National Assembly went out there, collected the voices of the Nigerian people, and ensured that that was stopped dead in its tracks. When Nigeria was I was in the National Assembly at the time when there was the doctrine of necessity. I mean, our hands were up in the air as to what to do, and again, an independent National Assembly. But there has always been the attempt of executive overreach, and I remember the picture of the headlines. I think it was Daily Trust. It said, "Reps defied zoning, elect Tambuwal as speaker." And the same thing happened in the Senate. And so it took resilience to say that it is primus inter pares, it is our institution governed by us, three equal arms of government that must regulate each other. And so the National Assembly at a point was very powerful, yes. But then over the years, we have seen that the National Assembly, I mean, all the borrowing plans, I remember in the House of Representatives as well as in the Senate, there was a committee on loans and aids. So every time that the president brought a loan request, when it was read on the floor, it went to the Committee on Loans and Aids. We looked at it, we looked at the conditions behind that loan, we brought it back to plenary, discussed it, debated it, and most times we refused because sometimes it wasn't project specific, sometimes it was clarity, it was shrouded in opacity. We just refused because it was not in the interest of the Nigerian people. Now we've seen loan requests back to back, and when you ask individual members of the National Assembly what are the reasons behind these loans, what are the conditions behind these loans, what is, everybody just seems like they were not in the room. So for me, I think that the National Assembly has seen a period of struggle. It has peaked. Unfortunately, today, the National Assembly is struggling and it has tanked.
And Mr. Dare, bringing you into the conversation, if you have to put today's theme on a scale, what is working and what is not, which one do you think will outweigh the other?
Today's what?
Yeah, what is working and what is not working, which one would outweigh the other?
Sounds like a trick question, isn't it? And I think that if we get ourselves bogged down on metrics, we might shield ourselves from reality. Oftentimes, it's not a black and white thing. And when it comes to what is working, when it comes to democratic journey, when it comes to structures, when it comes to the economy, it's a process that is a continuum. When we looked at the first, second, third, and fourth republic, we found that we've had several presidents who had come, who had tried to address different issues and challenges of our country, who had done their bits and moved on. We have a nation that is 60 plus years right now. We look at America, we see what is happening in America. It's still not a perfect union, 200 years plus in governance. And I think our interest today should be to fast forward to look at what is work and at whose watch. The current leadership, clearly, we see clear markers about efforts to reverse the bleedings of the past. We see a lot of data, and I say for every data we see, there's a data, there's another data, and there's a counter data. So what's working? What's working is the fact that we have had the Nigerian economy recalibrated. The figures we want to quarrel with were all in the red, in the negative, prior to when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came. Who can quarrel with the current GDP? The World Bank is where we run to. When people quote 140 million Nigerians under poverty, it is the World Bank that gives that data. When the same World Bank says this economy, the growth outlook and prospects for the Nigerian economy is now 4.4. People have a quarrel with that. The same institution. So I will stay with what's working, because the fact that it's working means that you've taken care of what is not working. And you have a government that has gone on the path of reforms. Malam El-Rufai talked about reform. And I did in my paper, I said reform is the insurance for democracy, because no society progresses without reforms. India had to embark on reforms before it got to the level where it is, with its massive population. The same thing in Egypt, when they had the meltdown, Forex, Electricity was down completely. They went on the path of reforms. And now we can point to Egypt as one of the successful countries, economies in Africa. Ghana, we all remember when Ghana started its problems. Ghana went on the path of reforms. Now you see even Nigerians preferring to go to Ghana to attend school. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has placed this country on the path of reforms. Reforms are painful. Reforms cannot start from 0 to 100. It's a process. Are we seeing the results of these reforms? Microeconomic reforms? Absolutely. Are we seeing the impact on our society? Yes. But it's progressive, it's going to take time, and we must tarry as a country.
All right. Okay, let's bring in Malam Nasir Rufai to the conversation. If you can hear us, Malam, can you just confirm if the audio is clear enough?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Hello.
I hope you can hear me and see me. Hello, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me and see me. Hello? Hello? Hello?
When they benchmark and they measure poverty, it must not isolate the reality of that country.
15 minutes in Q&A. Sure, I can hear them now. I can't. I can see them. I can't hear a word.
Yes, I think I can hear you now. ina da su life. Kina jin su? Ina jin magana.
Stable enough, we would circle back to him. But if you can attempt to answer the question from your own understanding, every administration promised reform. At one point or the other, it was supposed to be the solution. Some would say we've missed Vision 2020, even before 2015, we've missed Vision 2030, which is still yet to come.
Again, it's the leadership selection process, because it's one thing to have the policies, it's yet another thing to have the drivers of the policy. It's one thing to have a vision, it's another thing to have the political will to drive these policies. And so when we come up with this highfalutin Vision 2020, this by the year, those 35% affirmative action and all those kind of highfalutin things, the question is, what is the expertise behind it to drive it? What is the will to drive it? What is the continuity that is required to drive it? And what is the feedback mechanism in trying to drive it? Now, I find that most of the time we go to all these summits abroad and we import a lot of things from these summits. For instance, the climate justice conversations and all those kind of things. And I am an advocate for climate change, but I also believe that, for instance, when Nigeria comes up with its climate change policy, you see us importing the climate change policy of countries that, one, are not petro states, two, that are the top emitters, and three, do not have greater capacity to deal with climate change. So when Nigeria, for instance, is talking about the fact that we want to turn to renewable energy by 2020, our mainstay is petroleum. We have no business having that conversation. We should have the conversation of people who are saying drill, drill, drill. Again, when they say that we want to contribute X amount of money to climate change, my question is that the whole of Africa, 54 countries in Africa, contribute 3% to carbon emissions. United States does 24%, China does 29%. So the only conversation that African countries should be having is climate justice, where we hold the top emitters to account. But what happens is that we come up with policies that are importations from the countries that do not share our same complexities, and we expect them to work. And I think that was just an example.
All right. Mr. Dare, if we could just switch to politics a little bit. During Malam Nasir Rufai's presentation, he did talk about coercion, he did talk about a variety of things, which I think directly is targeted at the government that you are a part of. From 99 to date, we've seen the emergence of strong political parties. We've seen some of them die out. We've seen some of them relatively stay alive as we speak, as we prepare for 2027. Do you believe people who say that the APC has become an existential threat to political parties in Nigeria because of this incursion into opposition parties in the country? Do you believe that there is some sort of legitimacy in the argument there, and why they express those worries as we prepare for 2027?
No, I don't think there's any credibility to that. And if you back up a bit, history will teach us. We are witnesses, most of us are witnesses to 16 years of PDP rule. And the same could be said at that time. PDP was the dominant party. We are within a multi-party system, let me say. And what you get really is what we got that time, a dominant party, the PDP. What you have now is the dominant party, the APC. And what are the characters of this dominance? PDP had 21, moved to about 28 states. We knew what happened those 16 years. when they had the presidency. The multi-party system that we have in this country is almost sacrosanct. Now, what we get now is, and I'm careful about the language because I remember what the chairman said, but it's very important to say that the cry of the opposition about incursions into their parties, where do you want to place that? Because we just said one of the things working in the Fourth Republic is that people are able to move from one party to another, that democratic choice. So when a governor moves from a party to another, how do you blame the APC for that incursion? That's on the one part. But also, I think the fear, you didn't say it, but the fear is that, oh, APC, is pushing for a one-party state. And I say, look, Nigeria is a multi-party system. APC is a dominant party, absolutely. Those that want to cross over can cross over. And let me conclude this response by saying we have a lot of ventriloquists around who claim to be visionaries, and there's a difference. I have been in the opposition before, and I know the swan song of the opposition. We're seeing that play out. But I think the opposition must bring a different play, bring better ideas, and push those ideas in very superior conversations.
Okay. To summarize, the APC is not bullying any opposition party. The opposition parties are simply just weak. I mean, how do you react to that?
I think it's very interesting that for somebody who says, and Mr. Sunday Dare says he's a Democrat and a politician, and all those charming, well, you're not a politician, but you're strictly involved in politics. I think that 26 years later, I think what should be paramount is deepening and strengthening our politics, is strengthening our institutions, is ensuring that from loose arrangements, we start to forge ideological political parties that speak to the needs of the Nigerian people. And so when a person says to me that a governor who was elected on a particular platform can just move against the Electoral Act, against a pronouncement of the Supreme Court, which of course we're still dilly-dallying and shilly-shallying over, it really shocks me. Because I think it's not the fault of the APC, but it is actively supported by APC and just said by you as well. So what I'm saying in essence is that, I think that we all the actors in the political space have a responsibility to Nigerians to entrench true democratic ideals in a way that makes sure that the political parties act as filters as we start to look at the gatekeepers of our democratic experiment. I think that whether you're APC or PDP or whatever, when the Nigerians speak about us, they speak about us with one tar brush. And I think that we need to go back and do a lot of housekeeping about what kind of politics are we offering the Nigerian people in the hope that we can give them the governance that they deserve. And, I would rest my case on that. But I think that there's an active weaponization of state institutions against the opposition. I do.
All right. We're going to pause here for a moment and open the conversation up. The rules are quite simple. You must stay on the topic, and you have to keep it light. 2 minutes maximum. State your name and go directly to the point. We'll try as much as we can in the next 10-15 minutes to get as many respondents as we can. And if you have any question directed at the panel, because we understand Mr. Dare has to be somewhere. So I'm going to start with people who have any question that they would like him to respond to. Is there anyone? Anyone has a question for the Special Advisor on Policy Communication? Okay. Can we pass the microphone to the gentleman in the yellow vest?
Is the man in the yellow vest?
Yes.
Don't call Buba. Buba will speak for 10 minutes.
The man in the yellow vest. Gentleman in the yellow vest. No mic.
Okay. Just before we get to him, one person, I believe Malam Umar Farouk, said that, Mr. Dari, you said, quote, democracy thrives in the atmosphere of economic fairness. Can you elaborate on the establishment of gold refinery, the private gold refinery in Lagos, and why that is? Refineries, where are the refineries within the northern region, he says, I believe. I hope I captured the question.
Gold refinery.
Yes.
Well, I'm not the Minister of Solid Minerals, but I did read a very strong rebuttal from the Ministry of Solid Minerals, explaining very clearly that it's a private refinery, bringing out the profile of the woman who owns the refinery and how she grew that refinery in the past 10 years. And there are pictures of the woman, of the refinery itself. It's private, strictly private, and government has no hand in it. And I know that, licenses have been issued, some have been cancelled, they're being reissued. So the question of the federal government setting up that refinery in Lagos, perhaps in the southwest, doesn't arise. That rebuttal is straight to the point, it's factual, and I think that would be my response to that.
Okay, any more contributions? Okay, please go ahead, the Publicity Secretary of the PDP.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ini Ememobong, National Publicity Secretary, PDP. First is to my big brother, Dare, who said that the political space has not been constricted. I'd like to ask that, considering the fact that you agree that democracy is a destination and democratization is the journey, and when you speak about the journey of the APC, you seem to speak about it from just 2023, and you admit that you took a fractured economy. Remember that APC was there 8 years before 2023. So tie that to consolidation of democracy. Tie that to the fact that people no longer trust the judiciary. Tie it to the politicization of the judiciary and the judicialization of politics. Tie that to the fact that clearly you have a minister in your administration who openly sits on television and says a president saved a governor in this administration. Tie that to the fact that there is absence of consequences. When you speak about GDP, please tie it to the fact that you meet everyday Nigerians, and when you interact with them, do they reflect the economy that you speak about, the GDP? Those are the things I want you to speak to.
All right.
Thank you so much. The identifier is very important. The Publicity Secretary of the PDP. And I wouldn't expect anything lesser than that. And you straddle between a question and, of course, a submission. You piled in so many things. Yes, there's no denial about it. The APC has been in government for close to 11 years. And we're unafraid to do an audit of the APC government in 11 years. But also, we're also bold to look at, because Nigeria is a work in progress, we're also able to look back to say the APC took over from the PDP. Somebody was in charge of the shop for 16 years. Somebody was supposed to have provided the rail transportation. Somebody was supposed to have improved our electricity with $16 billion. Somebody was supposed to have improved our airports, improved our schools for 16 years. And that somebody failed. And that's the PDP. But we have moved beyond that. It takes time to recover. It takes time for reforms to grow. So, in 11 years, have we seen this country improve? On the democratic level, yes. But we talk about the judiciary. And what we're seeing in the judiciary today is not particular to the APC in government. Reforms of the judiciary, the calls for that reform have been on for a long time. My sister has talked very eloquently about the legislature. We have the former Senate president here. I've never been a lawmaker. But you also know very clearly that every government we have, every set of lawmakers that come in, it is absolutely incorrect to want to simply label them as rubber stamp. Just imagine the Constitution, 109 senators, 362 House of Rep members, 360, and you say they're entirely rubber stamp. These are representatives of the people. And we have seen them in the last 2.5, 3 years pass laws that have benefited Nigerians, no doubt. Nations take loans. Nations do take loans. America is heavily in debt. This administration is taking loans it can justify. It can point to projects for which there's loans. So I think it's important. There are a few things you raised here that are personal. I want to stay on substance. But I know that the work of building this nation is a continuous one. Every administration inherits liabilities and assets. And I dare say that every government that comes in place tries its best to make sure it meets the challenges head on. Is the APC doing that? Absolutely.
Okay.
Are problems over? No. But I challenge everyone here to say, look at where we were 2023, 2022, and look at where we were now. Just take simply the unification of Forex, the arbitrage, 70%, the stability that has been brought into that entire Forex market. Take 20 years of fuel subsidy, the bleeding that took place, and where we are now, freeing up the resources for the subnationals.
Okay.
60% increase, etc.
All right.
Let's stay with the facts and leave the noise aside.
Okay. I suppose inadvertently, the Tinubu administration has become the backdrop to our conversation this afternoon. But let's proceed. Your contribution, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Comrade Issa Aremu. I'm the Director General of the Premier Labour Institute in Ilorin. I have a short comment for Mr. Sunday Dare. But before then, let me say there's something that has been working, which I thought all the panelists will have recognized since we started this republic. I think it's daily trust. You know, and I think for daily trust to keep faith with 23 editions of National Dialogue is highly commendable. We shouldn't take this for granted. And we can expand it to also the media generally has kept this republic alive. But my suggestion to Daily Trust, before I come to Dari, is that we need to make your panel far more inclusive so that we can have holistic views about what is working and what is not working. Looking at all the panelists, you know, they don't live on minimum wage. My dear friend, I wish him quick recovery. Minimum wage earners cannot go abroad for medical treatment, you know. That's Malam Merufai. But what I mean about that is that labor can also say about and I'm saying this with your background as a media man. Of late, the media has become very excited whenever there are frustration. They'll be reporting about coup attempt, all sorts of things that we don't need to, promote. Nigeria has gotten 8 presidential cycles of elections, highly commendable. We have 95 million registered voters, even though Nena pointed out that that doesn't translate to voting. Voting our party is coming up. All we need to do is to further deepen the democratic process, not less. How do we strengthen civilian supremacy of this
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade Aremu. And just another reminder that we have to stick to the rules of engagement. 2 minutes is maximum. We do not want to have to cut anybody off. But Mr. Sondedare, your quick response, and I also understand that you need to be somewhere else, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Comrade Issa Aremu. I'm not sure you gave a full declaration of who you are, Labour person, head of Modu Institute. I think the media is playing its role. The media is a watchdog. The media cannot shy away. I think the issue of excitement, the excitement that comes to the media is that they are reporting news and events as they break. But that excitement does not mean that they support military coup or are subverting the democratic process. Far from it. How do we deepen democracy? I think it behoves on everybody. The fact that first we must see that the judiciary is independent, fiercely. We must see that executive plays its role. And also, of course, the legislature. Critical, very critical. That indeed is a lifeway of every democracy. How do we deepen democracy? As citizens, we get the opportunity to go back to the poll every 4 years to either reward or punish our representatives. How seriously do we take this? Do we just pander? Do we sell our votes? Do we defend our votes? Do we play the roles we need to play? So when we talk about democracy, deepening democracy, it's not just about the leadership alone. When you look at the population of those who go to elective offices, and then you look at the number of voters who go to the polls to vote, is huge. We need vigilance. Vigilance is the price of eternal freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please, can we get a round of applause for our panelists and keynote speaker, Mr. Sondedare, as he takes his leave. Thank you so much. No, not really. I think we still have you on the panel for the time being. This is specifically addressed to you from Abubakar Kawu Baraje, CON. He says, you made mention of judiciary and INEC being critical stakeholders of democracy. The appointment of judicial officers and INEC officials should rest solely on the executive, or what do you think needs to be done?
I think that with the judicial processes, I mean, when we look at the democracies that Nigeria has emulated, like the United States, it's still, they're still battling with appointments to the Supreme Court, for instance. And I think that over the years, as we deepen and strengthen our democracy, I don't think the greatest problem, it should still rest, because there's the National Judicial Institute and so on and so forth, and they're all involved in the appointment of judicial officers. But I think what is the most important thing is the National Judicial Commission, the NJC, and the ombudsmen within, for instance, the judicial processes that holds erring judges to account, the name and shame, and more importantly, and I always point out, the most important office in any democracy is the office of the citizen. And I think that when there are judicial infractions and so on and so forth, we must always be reminded that it's not only permissible, like I said in my paper, but it is our duty to hold them to account, because as they say, and I hate to be cliche, that, you know, the sheer independence of the democracies dependent on the institutes or in the institutions that hold them to account. So I think the appointment is one thing, but I think holding them to account in the process of administering justice is more important, and I think that's what keeps them on the straight and narrow.
Okay, let's, before we wrap things up, some comments here, and I'd just like to read them out. Joy in Kuruka says, the question is this: while a lot has been said here about democracy, governance, accountability, and economic recovery, there seems to be a major silence around healthcare. One of the speakers mentioned seeking medical treatment abroad for bacterial infection, yet millions of Nigerians cannot even afford basic healthcare at home due to fake drugs, poor medical facilities, and lack of regulation. How can democracy truly work, and how can citizens truly trust leadership when those in power depend on foreign healthcare, while the system meant to serve the people continues to fail? Should healthcare not be treated as a core indicator of whether governance is truly working or not? She also doubled down to say that a lot was said about insecurity, yet little or nothing was said about the welfare of security operatives who confront these challenges daily. Many of them work under harsh conditions with inadequate support and welfare. How can the government expect professionalism and effectiveness from security operatives when their welfare is not prioritized? Should welfare not be central to any serious conversation about security and governance? Moving to the next one. Sabiu Zarenda says, before our eyes, nomadic education was launched, and look at how the agency has been abused, with consequences we are paying dearly for. He says, now the same mismanagement that plagued nomadic education is unfolding at UBEC and SUBEB. If we couldn't contain that rot in a micro-society like nomads, what hope do we have when UBEC and SUBEB undermine? It says undermining comes to the fore. Knowing how to tackle this menace is crucial for many. I suppose that's what he's trying to say. He said a strong reason for us to boost our security, especially regarding what's happening in our neighboring countries. Okay, the last one. This is from Quinette Anthony. She says, my question is directed to Honorable Nana Okeje. She's the only one left on the panel, so that's the only option. And it is about the Special Seats Bill, which aims to improve women's representation in our political institutions. My question is on the implementation challenges. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to the passing of the bill? Is it political, cultural, or legal? And how can we overcome this? If you can just make an attempt to answer that and the one that came before it.
Okay. Well, with regards to the Special Seats Bill, I shall answer you by telling you a story. I have a son. My father had two granddaughters who were 5 years older than my son, and they were showing signs of, growth, and they were charming and witty and chatty and beautiful. And my son comes 5 years later, and my father walks into the hospital, takes one look at my son and calls him leader of the pack. Now, if that's not affirmative action, I don't know what is. Because there he was, a day-old boy who had done absolutely nothing, and he was already the leader of the pack. And I think that that is one of the greatest cultural problems that we have. That leadership is conferred upon men whether or not they deserve leadership, and so that answers the cultural answer. With regards to political, it's deeply entrenched. With 4 women, and people react to what they see. So with only 11 women in the National Assembly and some states having 0 women, the picture of leadership wears a pair of trousers. And so Nigerians are socialized to believe that leadership is male, forgetting that back in the day we had the Queen Aminas of Zaza and so on and so forth, who were very strong women and female leaders, and we had the Aba women riots led by strong women. And so when we try to suffer from the tragedy of the incomplete narrative and say historically women have always been in the backdrop, that's not true. Nigerian women have been very strong and they've led from the front. So I always challenge that cultural question. Now, with regards to politics, I mean, they would say that, and I'm always pat the example, if Nena could do it, so can you. But, you know, I don't even want to tell you the backstory of how Nena gets to do it, because it's too much hard work. It's like all of us at the start line with both our hands tied behind the back and you asking us to run. One, there's disempowerment of women. Elections in Nigeria are ridiculously expensive. How many women are empowered to afford it? The leaky pipeline between the number of women who want to run and the women who eventually become the things that they want to become is so dramatic. And so, you know, it's a myriad of reasons. So that in itself is a whole conversation on its own. With regards to the soldiers and the people who stand on the wall and ensure that our democracy runs. Let me give full disclosure. I'm a barrack child. My father was the first set of the Nigerian Air Force, so I'm a little partial to soldiers, and I understand what it is that they've done. And yes, especially at times like this, when they battle the kind of warfare, asymmetric warfare that they face, they must be given every encouragement that is required. I know that also in dealing with what the response, and I believe also it's policy, what do we want to do? Do we want to assimilate insurgents? Do we want to decimate them? Do we want to relocate them? And again, that is an entirely different conversation as to the welfare. It also speaks to policy, it speaks to strategy, it speaks to engagement, and so on and so forth. So in that as well is a bit of a convoluted answer. With regards to healthcare, well, the truth of the matter is that with brain drain, most of the doctors in Nigeria and the working conditions of doctors in Nigeria is pathetic. And so, yes, in the National Assembly, there's been conversations that people in public office must not be allowed to go abroad for medical treatment, that hopefully that would ensure that we deepen and strengthen our health institutions. Like, I believe that it's work in progress. Again, it goes back to the people. How much citizen engagement is there? How much do the citizens demand what they want? And how much do we, the people in voting, help the leadership selection process to actually elect people who are going to answer to the questions that we raise?
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the last woman standing on the panel, Honorable Nena Okeji. Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution. And yes, please can we get a round of applause for the members of the audience for being fantastic, for being patient, and for being attentive. Okay, here's a sweetener. So in recognition of the wonderful work that the winner of the 2025 Unsung Hero, Sheikh Sagagi, has gotten an additional sum to help with his philanthropic gesture. And this is coming from the chairman of the occasion, former Senate President Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, is donating an additional 1 million naira to Sheikh Musa Ibrahim Sagagi. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for adding value to this award. All right, I believe we have come to the end of what has been a successful engagement, the 23rd Daily Trust Dialogue. To formally close this program, I would like to invite the Group Chief Executive Officer of Media Trust Group, Malam Ibrahim Ahmed Shekaro, to deliver the vote of thanks and to, of course, share a message. Thank you.
Good afternoon, our chairman for today's event, our special guest, Good afternoon, participants. It has been such an honor for me to be part of this wonderful event. And on behalf of the Media Trust Group, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to all our esteemed guests, starting, of course, with the chairman of today's event, Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki. So we have a fair idea of your extremely busy schedule, and given the demise of the emir of the imam of Ilorin recently, we understand that as the Wazirin Gari of Ilorin, you are probably expected to be by the emir's side to support him in receiving people who are coming to condole with all of you there. The fact that you still flee out to come and join us here shows the tremendous respect that you have for our company, and of course, your commitment as a person to keep to all promises that you've made. We immensely appreciate this, sir. Our special guest of honor, KBAC, we also know that the KBAC had to make certain adjustments to ensure that he's personally here with us today. We don't take this for granted, sir. We really appreciate your presence with us, which is really a great honor to us. Special thanks to our guest speakers, starting with Honorable Nnenna Elendu Ukeje. When we extended our invitation to her, she was actually curious and was wondering whether it was actually a setup, that out of the lots that are there, some people who are eminently qualified to do this, why choose me? We are really glad that you actually accepted our invitation after we actually explained to you why we chose you to be one of our guest speakers. Mr. Sunday Dare is actually one of us, being a journalist, but we don't take it for granted that he has to be here with us. He's also a very busy person. Any person working around, under the president must be an extremely busy person. So the fact that he accepted our invitation, we really feel honored, and we thank him most sincerely for being here with us. I think Malam Nasir Ahmad El-Rufai deserves more than thank you for making the extraneous effort to join us virtually for this 23rd Daily Trust Dialogue. We do not have sufficient words to express our appreciation to Malam, and we pray that God Almighty will grant you speedy and complete recovery, and I think a lot of Nigerians look forward to having you back home. Our heartfelt gratitude also goes to our special guests at today's event, the National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Professor Nentawe Yilwada, His Royal Highness Alhaji Dr. Musa Idris, MFR, the Emir of Jua. Other special guests, too numerous for me to mention, because time will not actually allow me to recognize and appreciate everybody individually. Our Daily Trust Unsung hero for today, Sheikh Musa Ibrahim Sagagi, we are exceedingly delighted that you are able to join us, physically here today. We thank you most sincerely. Our partners, starting with the Nigerian Communications Commission, the Office of the National Chairman of the All Progressives Congress, APC, the National Emergency Management Agency, MTN Nigeria. We really appreciate your support in the course of organizing today's event. Sincere thanks to the management of the University of Abuja and the Lotsville Academy, Gwarimpa, for accepting to send their students who are here with us, and we believe that there are lots of takeaways for them. the chairman and members of the board of directors of our own company, we cannot thank you enough for being supportive in the course of organizing today's event. I would also like to thank our shareholders immensely for always being present at the series of dialogues that we've been organizing in the past 23 years. We really appreciate your support. And kudos to members of the organizing committee of the 23rd Daily Trust Dialogue. This great event has put together, that was put together, at the expense of a lot of your personal comfort. Our board is really proud of us, and may God Almighty reward all of us. Amen. Immense thanks to the management team and the entire staff of the Media Trust Group, because it's not only members of our organizing committee that actually worked to put together today's event. Our colleagues from various departments who are not members of the organizing committee have also contributed enormously in numerous ways towards making today's event the huge success that it is. Our colleagues from various media organizations that have actually supported us, promoting some of our press statements, and joining us today to cover this event. We really appreciate, your kindness. The management of NAV Conference Center and Suites, we thank you for the partnership and for the ambience of this hall. I wish to sincerely appreciate all participants that have made this event a memorable one for all of us. I would like to thank you all present here for making the time to be with us and helping us make this event a grand success. Thank you, one and all. Above all, I would like to give the greatest gratitude to God Almighty for making it possible and easy for us to organize, converge, and have a successful event today. I pray that He Almighty will spare our lives and give us the convenience to put together a greater show next year, which is an election year in our country. Amen. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that vote of thanks. But we've come to the end of the 23rd edition of this dialogue. But before we go, I'd like to call on Dr. Abubakar Bukola Saraki, as well as His Imperial Majesty, the Chairman, Board of Directors of Daily Media Trust, as well as our Unsung Hero awardee, to take a group picture quickly before we close this dialogue with the national anthem. Pardon me, I'd like to call on the Emir of Jiwa as well, Alhaji Idris Muhammad, to be part of the pictures. Can you be on the podium so that at least it could be easier to take the pictures, if possible? Photographers, is it going to be more conducive for them to be on the podium? Nobody's.